Welcome back to Morbidium, where the stories don't fade, they linger. Last season, we walked through the shadows, unsolved disappearances, fractured timelines, unanswered questions that still echo through the dark. But this season, we go deeper into the files that were closed too soon, the voices that were silenced, the truths that were buried beneath over fear and time. This isn't just true crime, it's the anatomy of what lingers after. Every case we tell carries weight for the victims, for the families, and for the communities left searching for peace. And as our audience continues to grow, so does our responsibility to tell these stories with integrity, empathy, and relentless curiosity. Season 3 is about unfinished business, cold cases that refuse to stay cold, mysteries that unravel when you pull the close thread, and the chilling realization that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what happened, it's what didn't. So dim the lights, lock the doors, and lean in close, because the truth is out there, and we're not done looking. This is Morbidium.
Right, so Elkview, West Virginia, 2 a.m. on April 16th of this year, 2026. And I swear, this is one of those cases where you read it once and you think, yeah, okay, got it. And then you read it again and it's like the story itself is gaslighting you.
So we're talking about John Curtis Lucas. He was born in 1981. And his family said that when he was 16, he got into this really serious head on crash with a school bus. This resulted in traumatic brain injury and frontal lobe damage.
Yeah, his family have described him as kind of stuck emotionally at the age he was at the time of the injury. His dad's even called him a perpetual teenager, which is both heartbreaking and also not exactly a medical term, but you get what he means by it. He was never described as violent by them or anyone that knew him. He had his struggles, yeah, but he loved, he was supportive, he was religious, he was all of those things.
Yeah, and that context really matters here because what happened that night is already complicated before we even get into the incident. Around 2 a.m., two EMS workers are near their station in Elkview. They later say they see John outside. They described him as acting suspicious, wearing what looked like a bathrobe at first, later a trench coat, and they believe he might have had a knife. Now, that believe part, that becomes very important later.
Oh, yeah, because he might have had a knife. Is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this story for something that's never actually shown up. It's like emotionally charged guesswork, but in real time. So, anyway, they leave the area in the ambulance, which, fair enough, that's what you should do if you genuinely think there is a danger. I mean, I'm not going to judge that part, at least not yet.
Right. So, according to the EMS version, they're driving along Railroad Avenue near a place called Tudor's Biscuit World. And John suddenly runs out from beside a building and jumps onto the hood of the ambulance. They keep driving, he falls off, and they call 911. That's the version that initially goes out.
Yeah, it's a very neat little story arc. Very, this happened and then it was over. But then dispatch audio shows up and goes, actually, about that. Because dispatch literally says, and this is a quote from the dispatch recordings, they actually hit the male with the vehicle while when they were leaving, which already shifts the entire vibe. That's not a jump on the hood situation anymore. I mean, that's contact.
And the thing is, it doesn't stop there. Dispatch is getting live updates. and they're being told the man might be on or under the ambulance. Then they report something that really changes everything. They can hear screaming coming from underneath the vehicle.
And I don't know how else to say this politely, but that's the kind of sentence that makes you sit back and say, what the actual fuck? Because now this isn't he fell off and we called it in. This is someone might be under the ambulance and is actively screaming. And at that point, dispatch told them to stop the vehicle.
But the audio indicates that they don't stop right away. Dispatch says, I'm not sure what's going on with this crew. They're mobile again, driving past the Dairy Queen now. So the ambulance was still moving at that time.
Which is not ideal. I mean, let's be honest here. That's one of those sentences you never want attached to your shift. And then later dispatch reports that the screaming just stopped. So now you've got a situation that's already escalated. A vehicle's still moving and then it goes quiet. And that's never going to be the good type of quiet.
What's been reported based on evidence summaries is that during this period, John was dragged beneath the ambulance for around 2 miles. He obviously suffered catastrophic injuries, including traumatic amputation of his arm. Y'all, that means his arm was ripped off. That's the sugar coated way of saying it. And based on this dispatch audio, he was still alive during part of that because screaming was heard from underneath that vehicle for a majority of that.
So, just to be clear on where we are at this point, we've gone from he jumped on the hood to he may have been under a moving ambulance while screaming. I mean, that's not a small narrative shift. That's like completely swapping the genre halfway through the story.
Yeah, and then there's the surveillance footage that the family obtained. Now, it's not been publicly broken down in full forensic detail in a way that we can have independently verified, but it's been described as showing the ambulance stopping, then moving forward again towards John before running him over. Rear facing footage reportedly shows he doesn't come out from underneath that vehicle.
Which, if accurate, really complicates the idea that this was just that brief accidental moment of he jumped onto the ambulance and then fell off. Because that sounds like motion directly towards him, not away from a clean break in this situation.
So eventually, deputies find him on US Route 119. He was still alive at that point. He was unresponsive, but he was breathing. He had a faint pulse. He had suffered severe trauma, including the arm injury and leg injuries. He was taken to a hospital where he later died.
And then we get to the official initial report, which is, let's just say, really simplified. So it was suspicious man, possibly armed, approaches EMS, jumps onto ambulance, falls off, dies later. I mean, it was very tidy, almost suspiciously tidy given everything else we know.
And that's where the contradictions stack up. EMS says he jumped onto the ambulance. Dispatch says he was hit by it. The EMS version implies a short incident. Evidence suggests he was dragged for a very significant distance. The EMS account doesn't reflect awareness at all, but dispatch says they heard screaming and they believed he was under that vehicle. And they had instructed him to stop the vehicle. And that was followed by continued movement.
And we can't forget about the knife situation too. I mean, EMS state that they believed he had a weapon. But from the impact point to where he was discovered, no knife has been recovered. And there was at least one witness who has said he didn't have one on him. And that leaves you with a very important question mark sitting right in the middle of this assumption that started this whole thing.
John's family strongly disputes the idea that he was a threat. They say his brain injury affected his behavior and judgment, and they believe he may have actually been trying to get help that night, possibly due to a tick bite, that he could have been trying to wave this ambulance down.
And the thing is, as more has come out, including the dispatch audio, video descriptions, internal reviews, officials have basically came forward and said that the initial account doesn't fully match the evidence that they have reviewed. It's reported that there is over 250 pieces of evidence that are being reviewed currently, and the investigation is still ongoing. And I mean, that is a lot of evidence for a story that was originally he jumped and fell, and that was it.
And in the aftermath, the EMS workers were placed on administrative leave. There's been public reaction, there's been protests, and the family is pushing for criminal charges. From their perspective, they're saying if somebody is struck, heard underneath a vehicle, told to stop, and the vehicle continues anyway, that has to be taken seriously. And they're so right.
And from their side, I mean, their frustration isn't just about what happened that night. It's also about how the first version of the story was pushed out there, and it shaped the picture that was projected to people before the truth finally came out or started to come out. Because, as I said, this is still ongoing. And these two versions we have of that night, I mean, they don't sit in line with each other at all.
And right now, that's where it sits, still open, still being investigated, still multiple versions of the same night competing with each other. And no matter how you look at it, there's no simple explanation that ties everything together neatly, which is what we all love.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't one of those cases where the only thing that is clear is, I mean, nothing's clear at all. And that is something that really does stick with people the most. Right. So, because this is what we do, let's sit with this for a second before we try and wrap it up neatly. Because I don't think this case does neat. It's more like a tangled charger cable. You pull out your bag and then regret doing so immediately.
That's the most accurate description of this case I've heard so far, honestly, because we've got EMS saying one thing, dispatch saying something very different, and then evidence that doesn't seem to have cleared up one version. It's like, I'm not going to help either of you. Good luck. It just leaves too many unanswered questions thus far.
Yeah, and the frustrating part really is that every version of this does have some form of structure to it. The EMS account, I mean, it sounds clean, it sounds plausible, but then the dispatch audio comes in and it sounds like they're talking about a completely different incident.
I mean, and what sticks with me is that dispatch moment, though, the one where they say they can hear screaming from underneath the ambulance. Because regardless of everything else, assumption, suspicion, what people thought was happening, that was a very real, very human detail in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, and that really is the bit that stops this feeling like a case. And it makes it feel more like an unfolding situation where nobody's fully in control of the outcome anymore. And then you've got the instruction to stop, and that's one part that my brain cannot compute. You can hear screaming, you're told to stop, and they keep moving after that. I mean, it really is where this one sticks with me mentally.
I think that's why the family has been so vocal about it. I mean, families tend to be pretty vocal anyway when they feel there's been an injustice, but this one even more so, because from their perspective, they're looking at a sequence and saying that there was awareness, there was instruction, and from the outside looking in, the answer seems oh so obvious.
And I mean, then because, we do like to look at things from all sides, and we do have to look at the EMS, where they were describing fear and a perceived threat and confusion in the moment. If that was true, then it does change your perception of how they may have reacted in that initial moment. But at the same time, what happened afterwards? You can't explain that away. And as we've seen enough in these kinds of cases, perception in high stress situations is not always reliable.
Right. But then the evidence part complicates it further because the reports of distance, like 2 miles, that doesn't really line up with a brief fell off the hood scenario. 2 miles is far.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 miles thing, that's not a oops, he slipped and that's that. I mean, 2 miles is a really long time. And to say you didn't have clarity or understanding on what was happening under your vehicle for that amount of time and distance, I mean, they could hear screaming.
Yeah. And that's where it gets so uncomfortable because you're trying to understand how so many different interpretations of that timeline exist. But then you also, like, this family is out there waiting for answers and they're getting zero resolution and not feeling like they're getting justice. And that's a terrible position for any family to be in.
I mean, yeah, it's when you look at this and all these little pieces, and for us, it is like I was going to say fun, and it's not fun, but the back and forwards, the trying to figure it out, the outrage at the difference between these different accounts, and then the evidence that's coming out. It's one thing from an outside perspective to look at this and be frustrated, be outraged, but to be the family living it is such a different thing. I mean, even to the point where there's claims and statements about your child who you know was non-violent and who wasn't that type of person. This all being blamed on the fact that it was thought he had a weapon and that he had a knife. But that theory completely evaporates when that knife doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a big one. Because if you remove that assumption, if you remove that, oh, we thought he had a knife, the tone of this entire encounter changes.
Exactly, because you remove one brick from a story like this, and suddenly the shape of the entire thing changes. And it's not that a lack of a knife proves anything just on its own, but when you add that in with everything else that doesn't add up, it is a part of the original justification for events that the way they unfolded just this is one of those ones where my brain malfunctions because everything is so all over the place.
Well, I mean, there's John himself. And when you think about the context of somebody running at you in a dark area with a knife or a weapon, that's a different scenario than somebody who has special needs or maybe a little slower running towards you, waving their arms. Hey, hey, I've gotten an injury. Can you help? And it breaks my freaking heart. Like, I love our first responders. I never want anyone to think that I don't, but I think we're missing a huge training opportunity in dealing with people who are slower and have mental health issues. And I'm not the first person to say this. I won't be the last person to say this. But this family's description of John isn't of somebody who is operating in a typical cognitive way. They're pointing to this brain injury and judgment issues and emotional regulation struggles. And we are not teaching our first responders in mass how to deal with such things.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with anything you've just said, because when you take into account the differences that he had in his behavior, I mean, it really does add another layer to the complexity of this whole thing, because it asks you to question and challenge how you interpret behavior in the moment. I mean, what looks like intent or danger to one person might not be interpreted the same way by someone else who is aware and trained in the fact that different people approach in different ways, especially in high stress situations like this was.
And I do want to be careful here because none of that removes responsibility from the people involved. It just complicates the picture of what was happening in real time.
Exactly. And I mean, that's kind of where we land on this whole thing and its complexity. I mean, there's no clean edges in this one.
No, and since this one was brought to our attention, we have been discussing this at length. So I think we need to take a minute and just breathe because this is intense.
I mean, yeah, this is one that was brought to us and we were asked to look into and cover. And it's been a lot. I mean, not to make light of the situation, but I will say that I currently feel like I've emotionally done a 10K run and really put the wrong shoes on.
You always wear the wrong shoes because you're always in heels. But that's probably the most accurate way. You could have said that. Like this was a lot. We went to their Facebook page and um, read articles, and it was just brought to our attention that this injustice was happening, and it was important for us to talk about it. But with that being said, I've got coffee and a blanket, and I'm going to pretend that this didn't just make me so sad for the whole rest of the day because this is a true tragedy and a miscarriage of justice thus far.
I mean, it really is. And I'm going to follow suit with the blanket. And I'll probably lean more towards alcohol than coffee because, we both have really healthy coping mechanisms. I love that for us.
Seriously. This is one of those cases that is going to stay with you because we don't have a resolution for you. So hopefully with questions, we get a push for answers and this family can have some sort of clean edge at the end when they get resolution or justice or whatever is called for when all these pieces of forensic evidence come together.
If this episode stayed with you, make sure you're following Morbidium so you never miss a story. And if you have a moment, leave a rating and review. It truly helps us reach more listeners and keeps these names from being forgotten. Share this episode with someone who cares about this truth. The more we talk about these cases, the harder they are to ignore. Thank you for spending your time with us, for listening with empathy, and for being part of a community that values justice over spectacle. Until next time, stay curious and stay compassionate.